My name is Eliana. I'm 34 years old. 2 weeks ago, my parents stood up at their 35th wedding anniversary dinner and announced to 40 guests, "We're taking the whole family to Santorini next month to celebrate properly." Everyone clapped. Glasses lifted. My younger brother Matteo whooped loud enough to rattle the crystal. I smiled, already imagining white cliffs and blue domes against the Aegean Sea. My first real vacation in 5 years. Then I made the mistake of asking a simple question. "What day are we flying out?" My father looked at me like I'd interrupted a prayer. My mother's smile tightened just enough for me to notice. And in front of every guest in that private room overlooking downtown Seattle, my father said, carefully and clearly, "You won't need that information, Eliana. Someone has to stay behind and watch Sofia's baby." 40 pairs of eyes. 40 witnesses to the moment my family reminded me exactly where I stood. Not in the photographs. Not on the flight. Not part of the celebration. But here's what they didn't know. For the past 4 years, I had been building something quietly. Patiently. And that night, standing there with a champagne flute trembling in my hand, I decided it was finally time to use it. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to subscribe to Women Reddit Stories right now, if you believe no one deserves to be humiliated in public by their own family. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Now, to understand why I walked away from everything I'd ever known, you need to see the family I came from. The Morales family lives in a glass and cedar home perched on a hillside in Bellevue, overlooking Lake Washington. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Imported Italian marble countertops. A driveway curved just enough to showcase whatever luxury vehicle happens to be parked at the top. The kind of house that doesn't just whisper success, it announces it. My father, Ricardo Morales, built a regional real estate development firm from nothing. He tells that story often. My mother, Isabel, has never drawn a paycheck in her life, but she manages our family's public image like it's a Fortune 500 brand. Charity boards. Museum galas. Political fundraisers. She can recite the names of every influential person in King County and exactly what they donated last year. Then there's my younger sister Sofia. 2 years younger than me, married to Daniel Carrington, a tech executive whose company went public 3 summers ago. They have a 7-month-old daughter named Lucia and a modern farmhouse in Medina that's been featured in 2 design magazines. And then there's me. Eliana works from home. My mother tells people when introductions are necessary. She does freelance design. Very flexible. Flexible. That word again. I design brand identities and digital campaigns for small businesses across the country. I have clients in Chicago, Austin, and Vancouver. My schedule is structured, my deadlines are real, and my income, while not Carrington level, is more than respectable. But in the Morales hierarchy, flexible translates to available. Available to pick up dry cleaning before events. Available to manage catering checklists. Available to babysit. My 12-year-old Subaru Outback, the one I paid off years ago, doesn't get the driveway spot. That space is reserved for Daniel's new electric Porsche. Guests notice those things, my mother says. "Eliana, would you mind parking on the street? It just looks cleaner." I never argued. I moved the car. That's the thing about being the dependable one. The quiet one. The one who doesn't cause problems. You start to believe your role is permanent. Thanksgiving? I arrive at 7 a.m. to start prepping because the catering team always needs supervision. I coordinate deliveries, arrange centerpieces, handle the seating chart politics so my mother doesn't have to. Sofia arrives an hour before guests in a cream sweater dress, kisses the baby, and floats into the dining room like a visiting dignitary. Christmas? I wrap every gift because my mother's wrists flare up this time of year. Interesting how they never flare during tennis season. Sofia's baby shower? I designed the invitations, built the event website, negotiated with the florist, and assembled 85 custom gift bags. My name appeared nowhere. Last spring, I spent 8 hours at Sofia's house while she and Daniel attended a last-minute networking dinner. I rocked Lucia to sleep 3 times, sanitized bottles, and folded laundry I hadn't dirted. The one time I mentioned I had a client launch deadline and might not be able to watch the baby on short notice, my mother's voice turned cool. Family comes first, Eliana. Everyone should understand that. Of all people. I understood perfectly. I was the safety net. The invisible infrastructure. The one who made things run smoothly so others could shine. Do you know when I first realized how deeply that role had carved into me? It wasn't at the anniversary dinner. It wasn't even the first time I'd been excluded from something important. It was 3 years ago on a random Tuesday night when I was cleaning up after one of my mother's charity luncheons. Guests had left. The crystal glasses were streaked with fingerprints. I stood alone in the kitchen wiping down marble counters that weren't mine, and I couldn't remember the last time anyone had invited me somewhere without asking me to help. 3 years ago, my life unraveled in a different way. I'd been engaged to a man named Aaron. We dated for 5 years. We toured wedding venues. We argued about color palettes. We talked about moving to Portland, about maybe adopting a dog first before children. Then one evening, sitting at our kitchen table, he said quietly, "Eliana, you're wonderful. You really are. But sometimes I feel like you're just there. Like you exist around everyone else's needs." I laughed at first. It sounded ridiculous. "I need someone who takes up space," he said. "You disappear." After he moved out, I found myself wandering through Pike Place Market one rainy afternoon. I ducked into a small photography shop to get out of the weather. That's when I saw it, a used Sony mirrorless camera sitting behind glass, marked down to $240. I had no business spending that money. I bought it anyway. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Sofia. I didn't even tell my closest friend. The camera became mine alone. I started walking around the city at dusk, photographing ferry workers tying ropes in the cold, elderly men playing chess in the park, waitresses counting tips after closing, women sitting alone in hospital waiting rooms, people who existed in the margins of other people's stories. I called the series Unseen. I created an anonymous Instagram account. No face. No surname. Just the work. Over 4 years, that account grew to nearly 18,000 followers. Quietly. Organically. Messages poured in from strangers who felt seen in those images. I kept the camera wrapped in a linen scarf at the back of my closet. The only thing in my life that belonged entirely to me. 2 weeks before my parents' anniversary dinner, I received an email I almost deleted as spam. Subject line: Exhibition Inquiry, Cascadia Contemporary Gallery. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. The gallery was based in Vancouver, British Columbia. The owner, Thomas Reinhardt, wrote that he'd been following my Unseen series for months and would like to discuss a potential solo exhibition. My hands shook as I read it. But I didn't respond right away. Because good things don't usually happen to the invisible ones. That night at the anniversary dinner, as applause filled the room for a trip I wasn't invited to, I felt something inside me shift. Not break. Shift. Like a fault line finally deciding it was done holding steady. And for the first time in my life, I started considering what would happen if I simply stopped being available. Someone has to stay behind and watch Sofia's baby. The sentence kept echoing in my head long after the applause resumed. I don't remember setting my champagne glass down. I don't remember the string quartet starting up again near the window. I only remember the heat rising up my neck as 40 guests carefully avoided looking at me. Sofia reached for my arm with a bright, sympathetic smile. "It's just for 10 days, she whispered, like she was offering me a favor. Lucia's still too little for international travel. And you're so good with her. So good with her. Daniel nodded once, already scanning the room for someone more interesting to speak to. We'll send pictures, he added, like that settled everything. My mother leaned in next. You work from home anyway. It makes the most sense. Makes the most sense. That was always the metric. Not fair. Not reciprocity. Convenience. The rest of the dinner blurred together. I refilled water glasses when the catering staff fell behind. I located a missing coat for one of my father's business partners. I directed guests toward the dessert table when the tiramisu was unveiled. No one asked if I'd eaten. By the time the event ended and the private dining room emptied, my feet ached and my mascara had smudged slightly at the corners from smiling too hard. Sofia caught me near the coat rack. I'll send you Lucia's updated feeding schedule, she said, already scrolling through her phone. And there's a new pediatrician number. Daniel switched practices. Oh, and she's teething, so sometimes she wakes up at 3. But you don't mind nights, right? She didn't pause for an answer. You're the only one we trust, she added. It sounded like praise. It wasn't. Daniel approached, loosening his tie. Dad wants family photos tomorrow, before we leave for Santorini. Make sure you're there by 9. Mom's particular about lighting. I blinked. Leave? Yeah, Sofia said. We're flying to New York first. Daniel has meetings before we head to Greece. I stood there, holding my coat. You're not coming for that part either? I asked. Sofia frowned slightly, like I'd misread something obvious. Well, no. It's a couple's thing. You wouldn't want to sit through finance dinners. Right. Wouldn't want to. They left in a blur of tailored wool and expensive perfume. I drove home alone across the floating bridge, the city lights reflecting in the dark water beneath me. My apartment in Capitol Hill felt smaller than usual when I stepped inside. The silence pressed in. I set my heels by the door and sat on the couch without turning on a light. Someone has to stay behind. You don't have a husband. You don't have children. What else would you be doing? Those weren't words they'd said out loud, not yet, but they hovered in the air anyway. My phone buzzed. A text from Sofia. Lucia's sleep regression is improving. I'll email you a Google Doc with everything. Love you. Another buzz. A group text from my mother. Reminder, family photos at 9 a.m. sharp. Neutral tones only. Eliana, please steam your blouse, last time it looked wrinkled. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened my email. The message from Cascadia Contemporary was still there. Unanswered. Waiting. Thomas Reinhardt had written 3 days earlier. Eliana. Your Unseen series carries remarkable emotional precision. I believe it deserves physical space, walls, light, presence. If you're open to it, I'd love to schedule a call to discuss a solo exhibition this autumn. Physical space. Walls. Presence. I closed the email. I told myself it wasn't realistic. That Vancouver was 3 hours away. That I had responsibilities. That Lucia needed me. That my family expected me. But another thought pressed forward, quieter but steadier. Staff can resign. The idea startled me. I stood and walked to my bedroom. I pulled the linen-wrapped camera from the back of my closet and held it in both hands. For 4 years, I had built something quietly. Not for applause. Not for validation. Just because it mattered to me. 18,000 people followed that anonymous account. Strangers wrote messages about how my photographs made them feel less alone. And yet in my own family, I was the extra. The built-in babysitter. The flexible one. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. Hey. Quick thing. Can you also handle the contractor meeting at our place Thursday? They're redoing the nursery shelves and Sofia can't be there. Thanks. Not a question. An assignment. I typed back before I could second-guess myself. I'm not available Thursday. The 3 dots appeared immediately. Everything okay? He wrote. I stared at the blinking cursor. Was everything okay? No. But it could be. I set the phone down without answering. The next morning, I showed up for family photos at 9, wearing a soft beige blouse exactly as instructed. Lucia wore a tiny white dress. Sofia and Daniel stood center frame. My parents flanked them, glowing. I stood slightly off to the side. The photographer adjusted us once. Maybe shift Eliana a little farther back, my mother suggested. We want to focus on the anniversary couple and the baby. Of course. After the session, while everyone crowded around reviewing images on the photographer's screen, I stepped outside onto the patio overlooking the lake. I pulled out my phone. I opened Thomas Reinhardt's email. And this time, I replied. Thomas. Thank you for reaching out. I would be very interested in discussing the possibility of an exhibition. I'm available this week for a call. My finger hovered for a second. Then I hit send. The response came within an hour. Wonderful. Can you drive up to Vancouver this Friday? I'd prefer to see the full portfolio in person. Friday. I glanced through the kitchen window. Inside, my mother was instructing the housekeeper about floral arrangements for a post-trip brunch. Sofia was laughing at something Daniel said. My father was reviewing emails on his tablet. No one noticed me standing alone outside. Friday. That was the day they flew to New York. Which meant they expected me to be at Sofia's house that evening. To start my 10-day shift. I felt my pulse in my throat. I walked back inside. Mom, I said evenly, I won't be able to watch Lucia next week. The room stilled. Sofia looked up first. What do you mean? I have a work commitment out of town. Daniel frowned. Out of town where? Vancouver. My mother's expression hardened slightly. For what? A meeting. With who? My father asked. A gallery. Silence. Sofia let out a short laugh. Like art? Yes. My mother exchanged a look with my father, that same silent language they'd perfected over decades. Eliana, she said carefully, this is hardly the time to experiment with hobbies. It's not a hobby. Daniel crossed his arms. We've already booked flights based on you staying. You booked flights without asking me. Sofia's tone shifted, thin and sharp. Because you're always here. There it was. Always here. Always available. Always waiting. My father set his tablet down slowly. Your sister needs you. And I need to do this, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. My mother's lips pressed into a tight line. Family comes first. I held her gaze. Except when it's Santorini. The air changed. No one spoke. Lucia babbled softly in her carrier, unaware of the fracture forming in the room. For the first time in 34 years, I did not soften the moment. I won't be available, I repeated. And something inside me, something that had been small and folded for years, began to unfold. The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. Sofia was the first to recover. You're joking, she said, but there was no laughter in it now. Eliana, this isn't funny. I'm not joking. Daniel's jaw tightened. We leave in 4 days. I know. And you're telling us now, he pressed. I'm telling you as soon as I decide. My mother stepped forward, lowering her voice the way she did when she wanted to appear composed in front of staff. This is selfish. There it was. The word that always came out when I didn't comply. I've rearranged my schedule for years, I said evenly. I've cancelled client meetings. I've skipped trips. I've worked nights so I could be available during the day. I'm not doing that this time. Sofia's face flushed. It's 10 days. It's not about the number of days. It's about Lucia, she snapped. She needs consistency. She needs her parents, I replied quietly. The words landed harder than I expected. Daniel stepped between us slightly, protective. Are you really going to do this right before we leave? You know how stressful this trip already is. I almost laughed. Stressful. They were flying business class to New York and then to a villa in Santorini overlooking the caldera. And I was the one making things difficult. My father spoke then, voice calm but firm. If you leave us in this position, don't expect us to forget it. Forget. I don't understand. Not respect. Forget. I nodded once. I understand. But I didn't mean it the way they thought I did. The conversation ended without resolution. Sofia retreated upstairs with Lucia. Daniel made a call, probably already calculating backup childcare options. My mother turned her attention back to floral arrangements as if I'd simply suggested a different napkin color. I drove home with my hands tight on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed before I even reached the freeway. Sofia. You're blowing this out of proportion. We counted on you. Another buzz. If this is about Santorini, you know it's not personal. Not personal. Being publicly excluded wasn't personal. Being assigned unpaid labor wasn't personal. Being the only adult child left behind wasn't personal. I didn't respond. That night, I packed a small overnight bag for Vancouver. I printed a selection of my photographs at the highest resolution I could afford. I laid them out across my living room floor, ferry workers, hospital waiting rooms, grocery clerks at midnight. Unseen. But not by me. At 11 p.m., my phone rang. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. Her message came through seconds later. Eliana, this is not how we raised you. You don't abandon your family. Your sister is overwhelmed. Daniel works non-stop. If you do this, you will cause damage you can't undo. Damage. I stared at the ceiling. Maybe the damage had been there all along. Maybe I was just the one absorbing it. Friday morning, I left before dawn. Seattle's skyline faded in my rearview mirror as I drove north toward the Canadian border. The sky shifted from charcoal to pale silver over the water. I rolled the window down despite the cold. The air felt different. Possibility has a texture. It's thin at first. Fragile. But it grows heavier the longer you hold on to it. By the time I crossed into British Columbia, my pulse had steadied. Cascadia Contemporary was located in a renovated brick building in Gastown. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Clean white interior. Minimalist but warm. I almost turned around twice before going in. Thomas Reinhardt did not look like I'd imagined. I'd expected sleek and intimidating. Instead, he was in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair pulled back into a low knot, wearing a dark sweater and round glasses. Eliana, he said, extending his hand. I'm glad you came. His handshake was firm, not dismissive. He led me through the gallery. Large-scale photographs hung under soft track lighting. Abstract canvases lined the far wall. The space felt deliberate. Important. We sat at a wooden table near the back. I laid out my prints carefully, one by one. He didn't speak at first. He studied. He leaned closer to certain images. He stepped back from others. He asked quiet questions about lighting, about timing, about the subjects. Then he stopped at a photograph I'd taken of a night shift nurse sitting alone in a hospital corridor at 3 a.m., her mask pulled down, exhaustion written across her face. This one, he said softly. This is why I reached out. I swallowed. She didn't know I was taking it, I said. I asked after. She said she felt invisible at work. Like if she stopped showing up, no one would notice. Thomas nodded slowly. You understand invisibility, he said. I held his gaze. Yes. He looked at me for a long moment. I'd like to offer you a solo exhibition this fall. The room seemed to tilt slightly. 15 pieces, he continued. Large format. We'll handle printing, framing, and marketing. You retain 60% of sales. 60%. Real numbers. Real walls. Real space. I don't have representation yet, I admitted. You will, he said simply. My hands trembled slightly as he slid a preliminary agreement across the table. Artist, Eliana Morales. Seeing my name in bold print, not under a family seating chart, not as an emergency contact, not as flexible, felt unreal. Take your time, Thomas said gently. But I didn't need time. I signed. When I stepped back outside into the Vancouver afternoon, the city felt sharper, brighter. I leaned against the brick wall and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. My phone buzzed. Multiple missed calls. Sofia. Daniel. My mother. A group text notification. Where are you? The nanny cancelled. Lucia has a fever. This is unbelievable, Eliana. I stared at the screen. For the first time, I didn't feel panic. I felt distant. I typed one message. I'm at a gallery signing my exhibition contract. I'll be back Sunday. Then I turned the phone off. I drove back to Seattle the next day, but did not to stay. When I unlocked my apartment Sunday evening, something inside me had shifted permanently. I opened my laptop. I emailed Thomas confirming exhibition dates. Then I opened my banking app. I calculated my savings. I looked up studio rentals in Vancouver. The thought came slowly, then all at once. If I wasn't needed for Santorini. If I wasn't considered part of the family celebration. What exactly was keeping me here? I stared at the packed overnight bag still sitting by the door. And for the first time, leaving didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an option. By the time I turned my phone back on Sunday night, there were 14 missed calls and 23 text messages waiting for me. Most were from Sofia. Lucia's fever hit 102. We had to scramble to find coverage. Daniel had to cancel a meeting. Mom is furious. One message from my mother stood out. You have embarrassed this family. Embarrassed. I had signed a gallery contract. They had announced to 40 people that I wasn't invited to Santorini. And somehow, I was embarrassed. I didn't respond that night. Instead, I opened my laptop and began mapping out the next 3 months. Exhibition timeline. Printing deadlines. Travel logistics. Budget projections. If I moved to Vancouver, I'd need to give notice on my apartment. Transfer clients to remote-only schedules. Apply for a temporary residency permit. The idea felt enormous. But so did staying. Monday morning, I drove to Sofia's house because I needed to say something in person. The Medina property sat behind a gated entrance with manicured hedges and a stone walkway that curved deliberately toward a glass front door. Daniel's Porsche was already gone. Sofia's Range Rover sat gleaming in the driveway. I rang the bell. Sofia opened the door holding Lucia on her hip. Her eyes were tired. Not from lack of sleep, from anger. So you're back, she said flatly. I told you I would be. She stepped aside without inviting me in. Lucia reached for me automatically. Instinct. Familiarity. I took her gently, pressing my cheek against her soft hair. I love her, I said quietly. Then why would you do this to her? Sofia shot back. I exhaled slowly. This isn't about Lucia. It feels like it, she said. You left us scrambling. Mom was calling agencies at midnight. You assumed I was available, I replied. You never asked. Her jaw tightened. Because you always are. That sentence again. Always. Do you know how that sounds? I asked. It sounds like you care, she snapped. No. It sounds like you expect. She shifted Lucia to the other hip, defensive now. You don't understand how hard this is, she said. Daniel travels constantly. I'm exhausted. I need help. And I've given it, I said softly. For years. She didn't deny it. She didn't acknowledge it either. You don't have kids, she continued. You don't have a husband. Your life is more flexible. Flexible. The word scraped across me. My life is not a gap you fill with your needs, I said evenly. Her expression changed, just slightly, from anger to something closer to disbelief. Are you seriously choosing a hobby over your family? She asked. It's not a hobby. It's Instagram, Eliana. It's a signed exhibition contract. That caught her off guard. You actually signed something, she asked. Yes. With a real gallery? Yes. She looked at me like I'd revealed a second identity. When were you going to tell us? I wasn't sure you'd care. Silence settled between us. Lucia tugged at my necklace, unaware of the fracture deepening around her. Sofia stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're being dramatic, she said. Mom's anniversary trip was a couple's thing. You know that. Then why call it a family trip? I asked. She hesitated. It's different for you. There it was. Different. Different how? I pressed. She didn't answer directly. You don't fit the same way anymore, she said instead. The words hit harder than the Santorini announcement. Not because they were cruel. Because they were honest. I handed Lucia back gently. I think you're right, I said. Sofia blinked. What does that mean? It means I'm not going to keep trying to fit where I'm not wanted. Her eyes flickered with something like panic. You're overreacting, she said again. No, I replied calmly. I'm reacting appropriately. I left before the conversation could spiral. That afternoon, I emailed my landlord to ask about lease terms. Month to month after September. Transferable. Flexible. There was that word again, but this time, it worked in my favor. Tuesday evening, my father called. I answered. Eliana, he said without preamble, your mother is beside herself. I'm aware. She feels betrayed. I felt humiliated, I replied. He was quiet for a moment. You could have handled this privately, he said. You handled Santorini publicly. Another silence. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, he added. Maybe it's always been this big, I said. He sighed. You know how your mother is. Yes, I said. I do. And Sofia? Has resources, I finished. He didn't argue that. We didn't mean to exclude you, he said finally. But you did, I replied gently. I expected anger. Instead, he sounded tired. What do you want from us? He asked. The question surprised me. I thought about it carefully. I want to not be the default, I said. I want to be asked. I want to be considered. Not assigned. He didn't respond immediately. We'll talk when we get back from Greece, he said at last. When are you leaving? I asked. Thursday. 3 days from now. 3 days until they boarded a flight without me. 3 days until I stopped being the invisible backup plan. That night, I pulled my suitcase from the closet. Not the small carry-on. The larger one. I folded clothes methodically. Camera equipment. Hard drives. Laptop. Important documents. Each item placed carefully felt like a vote. For myself. By Wednesday afternoon, I had given formal notice on my apartment. 30 days. I booked a short-term rental in Vancouver near Gastown. I scheduled meetings with a printer recommended by Thomas. I drafted an announcement post for my anonymous account. And when Thursday morning arrived, the day my family flew to New York before Santorini, I stood in my quiet apartment, keys in hand. My phone buzzed once more. A group text from my mother. Boarding now. We'll talk when we return. I looked around the space that had held my half-life. Then I picked up my suitcase. And instead of driving north for a meeting this time, I drove north for good. The drive to Vancouver felt different this time. Not like an escape. Not like a rebellion. Like a recalibration. Seattle faded behind me in shades of gray and blue. The highway curved along the water, evergreens blurring past the windows. I didn't turn on the radio. I wanted to hear my own thoughts clearly for once. At the border crossing, the officer asked the standard questions. Purpose of your stay? Work, I said. It felt strange, and solid, on my tongue. How long? A while. He studied my passport, then waved me through. Just like that. No drama. No confrontation. Sometimes the biggest changes happen quietly. The short-term rental I'd secured was on the third floor of a narrow brick building 2 blocks from the gallery. Exposed beams. Tall windows. Scuffed hardwood floors. It wasn't luxurious. But it was mine. I set my suitcase down in the center of the room and stood still. No one expected me anywhere. No one needed me in the next hour. The silence felt expansive instead of empty. I unpacked slowly, placing my camera on the desk by the window. The street below hummed with light afternoon traffic. A couple walked past holding hands. A woman balanced a coffee tray and laughed into her phone. Life moved. Independent of me. For the first time in years, I wasn't orbiting someone else's schedule. That evening, I met Thomas at the gallery to finalize exhibition details. He handed me a proof mock-up of the show layout, 15 of my photographs scaled large against white walls. Title at the entrance. Unseen, Photographs by Eliana. Seeing it printed that way made my throat tighten. We'll open in 6 weeks, he said. Press invites go out next Monday. There's interest already. Interest? I echoed. A journalist from Pacific Arts Review wants an interview. And a collector from West Vancouver asked about early access. Collector. Early access. These were not words anyone in my family had ever associated with me. I nodded, absorbing it. Thomas studied me carefully. You seem steady, he said. Most artists are nervous at this stage. I've been nervous for years, I replied. This feels like relief. He smiled slightly. Relief. That was exactly it. Meanwhile, back in Santorini, my family was discovering what 10 days without their flexible daughter actually looked like. I didn't know everything at first. The first update came from Sofia on day 2. A short text. Lucia won't sleep in the villa. The crib's different. She screams at night. I read it, then set my phone down. An hour later. Do you remember the pediatrician's after-hours number? I stared at the message. For years, I'd kept digital files for them. Immunization records. Emergency contacts. Backup babysitter lists. I'd memorized bedtime routines and medication dosages. They had never needed to know. Because I had always known. I typed back once. Check the folder labeled Lucia, Medical. It's in your shared drive. Then I muted the conversation. By day 4, the tone had shifted. A group text from my mother. This trip has been far more stressful than anticipated. The villa staff are inconsistent. A follow-up from Sofia. Daniel missed 2 dinners because Lucia wouldn't settle. And then, late that night. You would have handled this better. That one lingered. Not because it tempted me. Because it confirmed something. They didn't miss me. They missed my labor. I was infrastructure. Logistics. Emotional buffer. Without me, the machine sputtered. And still, not once did anyone say, "We're sorry." On day 6, something else happened. My anonymous account received a direct message from a name I recognized immediately. Sofia. Not through text. Through Instagram. "Is this you?" she wrote. Attached was a screenshot of my profile. Unseen, 18.3K followers. She must have searched my name. Must have gone digging. I didn't respond. But I knew what she was seeing. Years of work she'd never asked about. Comments from strangers praising my eye, my sensitivity, my storytelling. Messages from women across the country saying, "I feel like this photo is me." On day 7, my father emailed. Subject, "Saw something interesting." 3 sentences. "Eliana, I came across your photography online. I didn't realize the scope of it. It's impressive." Impressive. The word felt foreign coming from him. I didn't answer. Not yet. The exhibition date approached quickly. Printing proofs arrived at the gallery. Large, matte-finished panels. My ferry worker at dawn. The hospital corridor nurse. The woman sitting alone at a bus stop in the rain. Each one mounted carefully under perfect lighting. The space transformed. I stood in the middle of the gallery one afternoon while installers adjusted spacing. The room smelled faintly of fresh paint and wood. For so long, my work had lived inside a screen. Now it had walls. Presence. Wait. The night before opening, Thomas handed me a small stack of invitations. 40 RSVPs confirmed, he said. Maybe more walk-ins. 40. The same number of guests who had watched me be excluded at the anniversary dinner. But this time, they would be here for me. That symmetry didn't feel accidental. On day 9 of my family's trip, my mother finally called. I let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. Then I answered. "Eliana," she began without greeting, "this situation has spiraled." "I imagine it has," I said calmly. "You've made your point." "My point?" "Yes. About Santorini. About being included. You didn't have to disappear to prove it." "Disappear." I almost smiled. "I didn't disappear," I said. "I relocated." She inhaled sharply. "So you are staying there," she said. "Yes." Silence crackled over the line. "You're abandoning your family." "No," I replied evenly. "I'm redefining my role in it." Her voice dropped lower. "Do you know how this looks?" I thought of the gallery walls. The invitations. The press list. "It looks fine from here," I said. She exhaled in frustration. "We'll discuss this when we get home." "You're welcome to visit the exhibition," I replied. There was a long pause. Then she hung up. I stood in the quiet of my new apartment, phone still in hand. For the first time in my life, I hadn't apologized. And the world hadn't ended. Opening night arrived in a wash of pale autumn light and nerves that felt sharp but clean. I woke before sunrise in my small Vancouver apartment and stood by the window, watching the city stretch awake beneath me. Delivery trucks rumbled past. A cyclist pedaled through early fog. The air held that crisp edge that means summer is officially gone. 6 weeks ago, I had been standing in a private dining room while 40 guests applauded a trip I wasn't invited to. Tonight, 40 guests were coming to see my name on a gallery wall. I dressed slowly. Navy dress. Simple lines. Structured but soft. No dramatic statement pieces. No borrowed glamour. Just me. I left my hair down, something I rarely did at family events because my mother preferred it pinned back, cleaner that way, she used to say. I looked at my reflection in the mirror for a long moment. I didn't look invisible. By 5 p.m., Cascadia Contemporary hummed with preparation. A bartender arranged glassware along a sleek white counter. Soft instrumental music floated through the space. The lighting had been adjusted one final time so each photograph glowed without glare. Thomas handed me a glass of sparkling water. "Breathe," he said quietly. "It's your room tonight." My room. Guests began arriving at 6. A woman in her early 60s with silver hair stood in front of the bus stop photograph, the one of the woman waiting alone in the rain, coat pulled tight around her shoulders. "She looks like she's bracing for something," the woman murmured. "She was," I said, stepping beside her. "The bus was 40 minutes late." The woman nodded slowly. "It feels like more than a bus." It was. By 6:30, the gallery was full. Collectors. Local artists. A journalist from Pacific Arts Review with a small leather notebook tucked under her arm. 2 university students who had followed my Instagram account for years. A couple holding hands as they moved quietly from frame to frame. They weren't here for my parents. They weren't here for Sofia. They weren't here because I was convenient. They were here because they chose to be. Thomas approached me near the center wall. "Red," he said simply. I turned. A small red sticker had appeared beside the hospital corridor nurse. "Sold." My chest tightened. "For how much?" I asked. $3,800. $3,800. For a moment in a hallway at 3 a.m. For someone who felt unseen. For something I created alone in the dark. I didn't cry. I stood straighter. By 7, 2 more red dots had appeared. The journalist from Pacific Arts Review asked thoughtful questions about invisibility, about labor, about emotional erasure. "What drew you to these subjects?" she asked. "I know what it feels like to be present but not recognized," I said carefully. She studied me for a second longer than necessary. "I imagine that's personal." "It is." At 7:20, the gallery door opened again. And my world tilted. My mother walked in first. Cream trench coat. Perfect posture. Expression composed into something almost pleasant. Behind her was my father, scanning the room with restrained curiosity. Sofia followed, Lucia balanced on her hip. Daniel trailed slightly behind, phone in hand, eyes already assessing the crowd. They looked like they had stepped into the wrong movie. Conversation softened. Heads turned. Thomas moved subtly closer to me without making it obvious. "Eliana," my mother said, approaching as if we were meeting for brunch. We were in Vancouver for a few days after Santorini. We thought we'd stop by. Santorini had not included me. But Vancouver apparently did. "I'm glad you came," I said evenly. Her gaze swept the walls. "These are large," she observed. "Yes. You never mentioned this was happening. You never asked." A flicker of irritation passed over her face. Sofia shifted Lucia higher on her hip. "So this is the thing," she said. "The Instagram thing." "It's more than Instagram," I replied. Daniel cleared his throat. "We saw the Pacific Arts feature online. It's getting attention." Attention. The word held weight for them. My father stepped closer to one of the photographs, the ferry worker at dawn, rope slung over his shoulder, early light catching the lines on his face. "You took this?" he asked quietly. "Yes." He studied it longer than I expected. "It's good," he said finally. Good. From him, that was significant. My mother, however, was calculating. How many people are here? She asked softly. About 40 confirmed RSVPs, Thomas interjected smoothly. Plus walk-ins. 40. Her eyes flickered briefly. Symmetry has a way of sharpening truth. Sofia leaned closer to me. Lucia was miserable without you, she whispered. She wouldn't sleep properly the first 3 nights. I'm sorry she struggled, I said. But she adjusted. Sofia's jaw tightened. That's not the point. What is the point? I asked gently. That you left, she said. Yes, I replied. A woman near the back approached us then, tall, elegant, silver bracelet catching the light. I just purchased the bus stop piece, she said to me. I've never seen loneliness captured so honestly. I thanked her, my voice steady. My mother watched the exchange carefully. Purchased. Honest. Captured. Words that had currency. Another red appeared near the ferry worker. Then another near the grocery clerk at midnight. By 8:30, 5 pieces had sold. Thomas handed me a discreet summary sheet. Total sales so far, $17,200. My share at 60%, $10,320. $10,320. More than I had earned in 3 months of balancing my family's schedules and smoothing over their emergencies. My mother noticed the paper in my hand. What's that? She asked. Sales, Thomas said before I could respond. My father's eyebrows lifted slightly. Daniel's phone disappeared into his pocket. Sofia stared at the red dots as if they were foreign objects. You're serious about staying here, my mother said quietly. Yes. For how long? For as long as I choose. She inhaled slowly. You can't just sever yourself from us. I didn't sever anything, I replied calmly. I stopped being the default. Sofia's voice trembled slightly. We needed you. You needed convenience, I said. Lucia reached toward me, small hand opening and closing. I smiled at her. I'm still her aunt, I said softly. Just not her backup parent. Silence gathered around us again. But this time, it didn't feel like humiliation. It felt like recalibration. My father looked at me differently then, not as a dependent extension, not as support staff. As someone occupying her own space. We should let you get back to your guests, he said finally. My mother hesitated. Then she nodded once, controlled. They stepped away. Not triumphant. Not reconciled. But aware. I turned back toward the room. Another red dot had appeared. For the first time in my life, I wasn't standing at the edge of someone else's event. I was in the center of my own. By the time the gallery began to empty, 8 of the 15 photographs had sold. 8 red dots. 8 quiet confirmations that what I saw mattered. Thomas handed me the final tally just before closing. Total sales, $24,600. My share at 60%, $14,760. The number didn't feel like money at first. It felt like proof. Proof that the hours I spent walking the city alone weren't indulgent. Proof that the camera wrapped in linen at the back of my closet had not been foolish. Proof that I had not imagined my own worth. My parents left without another confrontation. No dramatic ultimatum. No apology either. Just a long look from my father as he followed my mother out the door. Sofia lingered near the entrance. Lucia said your name this week, she said quietly. Clear as day. I smiled softly. She'll learn new words too. Sofia swallowed. You're really staying here? Yes. She nodded slowly, as if testing the shape of that reality. We'll figure it out, she said at last. I wasn't sure what it meant. But for the first time, figuring it out wasn't my responsibility. After the last guest left, I stood alone in the gallery. The music had stopped. The bartender had packed away the glasses. The lights had dimmed slightly, leaving the photographs glowing softly against the white walls. Thomas approached with a small envelope. "Your advance," he said. The first portion cleared. I took it, feeling the weight of it in my hand. For years ago, I had been wiping down marble countertops in my parents' house after a charity event, wondering if anyone would notice if I stopped showing up. Tonight, people had shown up because of me. Not because I was flexible. Not because I was available. Because I was visible. 2 weeks later, Pacific Arts Review published their feature. The headline read, "Eliana Morales, The Art of Seeing What Others Mississippi." My photograph, the ferry worker at dawn, filled half the page. The article mentioned my background carefully. No family names. No Santorini. Just the truth of the work and the quiet courage of stepping into it. Messages poured into my inbox. Women who were the oldest daughters. Women who were the default babysitters. Women who were the quiet helpers in polished families. I didn't realize I was allowed to say no, one message read. "You made me rethink my own boundaries," said another. The exhibition closed 6 weeks later with 12 of 15 pieces sold. Thomas scheduled a second show for spring. I signed a lease on a small studio space in Gastown, brick walls, tall ceilings, enough room for editing and printing. I kept my Seattle apartment only until the end of the notice period. When the final day came, I walked through the empty rooms slowly. I stood in the center of the living room where I had once packed for Vancouver, unsure if I was brave or reckless. I wasn't either. I was done waiting for permission. I left the keys on the kitchen counter. I did not cry. Back in Vancouver, my life found rhythm. Morning walks along the harbor with my camera. Afternoons in the studio. Evenings answering emails from collectors and publications. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't famous. But I was anchored. My family adjusted too. Christmas arrived with a polite group text. "Dinner at ours if you're in town," my mother wrote. I sent back a simple reply. "I'll be in Vancouver this year. I hope it's lovely." No guilt. No justification. Sofia and I spoke occasionally, shorter conversations now. Clearer boundaries. She hired a nanny 3 days a week. Daniel survived. Lucia grew. My father emailed sometimes. Short messages. "Saw your latest series preview. Proud of the direction you're taking." I kept those. My mother called once. "Eliana," she began carefully, "I suppose this photography phase has become substantial." "It's my career," I said. A pause. "Well," she replied, "it seems you've made quite a name for yourself." Quite a name. That was as close to acknowledgement as she had ever come. "I've made space for myself," I corrected gently. Another silence. Then, unexpectedly, "You always were talented," she said. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. Months later, I returned to Seattle for a weekend, not for a holiday, not for an emergency, but for a collector meeting. I drove past my parents' house out of curiosity. The glass and cedar structure still gleamed. The driveway still curved perfectly. Daniel's Porsche still occupied the prime spot. But I didn't feel the pull to park on the street anymore. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel obligated. I kept driving. My life wasn't there anymore. It was in a studio overlooking Vancouver's harbor. In a camera bag slung over my shoulder. In red dots appearing quietly beside my work. In mornings where no one expected me to be anything other than myself. My parents humiliated me at their wedding anniversary. They announced a family trip and left me out like I was an afterthought. And in doing so, they handed me something I didn't know I needed. An exit. Leaving wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was alignment. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't argue your worth. It's build a life where your worth is obvious. If you've ever been the default, the flexible one, the reliable one, the invisible one, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not obligated to remain where you are not valued. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to choose yourself. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to Women Reddit Stories right now so you don't miss the next one. And tell me, have you ever had to walk away to finally be seen? Because sometimes, leaving forever isn't loss. It's freedom.